Nandalala tere pyare nam rahe. Gopala tere pyare nam rahe. Nandalala tere pyare nam rahe. Hello and namaste, my dear friends. Thank you for attending today for this lecture on forgiveness. I wanted to take a moment just to kind of center, close the eyes, take a breath, quick resurrection breath. Om Sarvesham Svastirabhavatu, Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu, Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi. Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinava Ditamastu, Mavid Vashavahai, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. All right. Again, namaste. So, thank you for your time and consideration. When I was back in teacher training, which is how I began my yoga journey to become a yoga teacher and then a Kriya Bon. I came to the spiritual path as a person who often felt that to be spiritual meant to let everybody walk all over me. And maybe that was a tendency that also came from being a Libra rising. But I have come through this process of maturing as a person and maturing as a soul and come to the idea of understanding forgiveness at a much deeper level. My own life journey has also brought me to these greater experiences. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, moved many times, ended up in Southwestern Virginia, married, divorced, married, 3 children. My 4th child was a yoga studio. Midlife crisis gone awry. Definitely one of the braver things I've done. And then that journey led me to astrology. And my most recent reinvention is moving to a different country, moving to Portugal. So that gives you just a little glimpse of who I am and where I've been in this process. But what I've really come to understand in all of this is that forgiveness, just like your spiritual journey, is really individual. It's mostly about you. It's not as much about other people. And we can really spend a lot of our time and energy focused on others. And we can do this in a positive way. We can do it in a beautiful and selfless way to focus on other people, whether we're nurturing our children or our businesses, our marriages, our relationships, our families. But at a certain point, we begin to realize in this process that it's not so much what happens to us, it's how we react to life. It's how we react to what happens to us. And so I think it's important anytime we speak about forgiveness to bring up the idea that there are things that can feel very unforgivable. I've encountered many people who have been in experiences, had experiences that one could see the reason that they might think, no, I'll never move beyond that. I'll never be able to say, I forgive that person, that group of people. And that's when things can kind of spiral into this idea of, oh, well, karma's a punishment. You know, in some way I deserved that negative thing or attracted that negative thing, or, you know, it can become very personal. And I think it's really important that we see the patterns, identify the patterns, so that we can understand the roots of forgiveness. The roots of forgiveness are that understanding that all of us are on this beautiful spiritual path and we are responsible for our own reactions. So even in forgiving what we might consider to be something unforgivable, what we're really doing is setting down the burden of that memory and that interaction. It really isn't about saying, oh, well, no, I don't think that was a negative experience anymore. Or, oh, I learned so much from it. So, you know, sure, that can happen again. I think that sometimes people get really caught up in a moral tangle about some of those things. And that's what complicates their relationship with understanding karma and what karma is and how it functions. So it's not about getting over something. It's not. Often we can really feel that way. Or sometimes I've often had clients or friends say, well, I guess I just have to get over it. No, that's not what we're talking about. True forgiveness. True forgiveness is letting go of that anger and the burden that it places on you. True forgiveness is letting go of what happened and instead moving forward on your own spiritual path. True forgiveness absolutely is not predicated on having a face-to-face conversation with the person or people that hurt you. And I think that's one of the harder things that people struggle with. They feel terrible sadness if someone passes away and they don't get to forgive them in person, or they feel some type of burden that they carry because they are unable to bring themselves to have that conversation with someone. But the reality is that often the people that we need to forgive are not ready for our forgiveness. And we can't wait for them. It's our timeline. It's our karma. It's our understanding and our path. And so in the same way that you might think of setting, the offering on the altar for someone to pick up later, we have to place that forgiveness on the altar of our self-awareness and not worry so much about the other person or people that we are needing to forgive. We are indeed connected to all. It is one of the primary tenets that I think once you really dig in to this work, it really brings you to that understanding. And though we have a responsibility to all, our primary responsibility is to ourselves. And that is why also that you won't really know if you've forgiven somebody except for you'll know. You are the one who's really going to realize whether you've fully achieved the freedom that comes from letting go of the anger, the grief, all the really difficult mix of emotions that you swim in when someone's hurt you, in whether it's a small way or a big way, or a way that you don't recognize at the time, but you come to later. I really do believe, and I think it's one of the harder things to convince students, at least, or at least to even bring the concept up that everybody's doing the best they can. I think the hardest reason, or the reason that that's the hardest thing to accept, is because we always ask ourselves, or am I doing the best that I can? And I would say, yes, yes, we are, and they are. But also, it's not up to you to decide whether they're doing the best they can. That should be your baseline. That's your operating system. Turn the question back to yourself. Are you doing the best you can? And okay, if so, then it's important that you are able to forgive them. But don't forget also that the person you'll probably need to forgive the most is you. You are the one that you'll need to offer that blessing to, because you will have regrets. You'll have moments of uncertainty. You'll place the head on the pillow and do the quick tarka through the day. And if you're paying attention, yeah, usually there's a few things you could have improved. And as you get older and you look through life with the new lenses of deeper understanding, there are lots of things that you might think, ooh, I wish I hadn't done that. Ooh, wow, that was a different version of me. Wow, I, wow, I hope I can forgive myself for that decision, that choice, the thing I said, the thing I did. But the true root of forgiveness, I believe, is to understand that forgiveness equals freedom. Forgiveness truly does lift you out of that entanglement of emotional connection. Truly, the deepest emotions connect souls together. Indeed, that's something that I've studied and learned. And deep emotion can be a positive, loving, kind emotion, or it can be a difficult, tangled, angry situation. This is why, as when we learn astrology, the first time you hear that the seventh house is the house of marriage and open enemies, you're like, how's that work? That doesn't make sense. And then, you get a few years on you and you understand that depth of emotion creates a bond. And that bond can transcend time and space. And it can do it for beautiful, loving, romantic, sweet, caring, parental, all those lovely emotions, but also the deep hurt, the anger, the betrayal, all of those emotions as well. And I will admit that it's been more than one or two clients or friends that I've gotten to consider forgiveness by saying, do you want to come back with that person? And this time they're going to be your kid, or this time you're going to be their parent? Like, you want to do this dance again with the same person? Because you're creating this pattern, you're creating this connection. And usually they'll think about that for a little while and say, yeah, no, I'd like to wrap this up. Thank you very much. And so, yeah, it's a process. Now, I do think it's important, again, I mentioned this before, that the other person's participation is not a requirement. It's a personal journey. And yes, indeed, there might be some people you need to have a conversation with. You need to clear the air. You need to sit down. But you need to understand whether their level of awareness is and in the space where they can literally hear what you're trying to say. And this is not a judgment. You're not, I'm superior, I'm spiritual, so therefore they won't get it. Not like that. In a like, wow, will they really be able to hear me? And if not, then you need to work with their higher self. And this is where ritual comes in. And I'm sure most of you who are here today are familiar with the Kriya ritual of forgiveness, which is incredibly powerful and incredibly useful. But I also think that sometimes you need a ritual with training wheels before you get to that one, because you have to soften the emotionality. You have to make sure you're really in a pure space to deeply ritualize and forgive, again, not just them, but you. And there are multiple techniques that I've worked with through the years that I have found have worked, especially when you're trying to break a resonance of vibration with somebody. Um, and I think you'll know if you're breaking that resonance of vibration with somebody, because if not, they'll keep coming around. A, or B, different versions of them will keep coming around because that's how it works. um, it's a spiral, but it repeats. And especially depending on if the karma is Plutonian or Saturnian, or, on and on. I think one of the most wonderful ways to start to work with forgiveness is to write the person a letter and to really write down everything you're feeling and thinking. But it's also important that it's not just a list of grievances, because there has to be a deep level of respect for the interaction and the karma. So I think it's important to say, yes, you did this, this, and this. That really hurt me in these ways, but also you taught me this, this, and this. Because this person in this situation was placed on your path. And perhaps they taught you to create boundaries. Perhaps they taught you, like I had to be taught, not to be a spiritual doormat. Perhaps they taught you to say no. I think it's really, really wonderful to start with that kind of almost like a purge, getting it all out of your head and onto paper, and then ritually burning it at the full moon. You can also consider forgiving even just places or objects. A home that didn't work out. It didn't become the home that you wanted it to be. Forgive that space. Forgive that space for having the anger in it. Forgive that space for, if you have a business and it doesn't go the way you want, whatever it is, you have to find that cord of energy that you've attached to it and not just sever it, but heal it. And I think that's where the idea of forgiveness comes in for all of that. I once was ritually trying to cut a cord with somebody who I clearly had not forgiven, because every time I imagined my Ishtar with their beautiful sacred blade, it would come down and hit the cord and go dink and just bounce right off. And I was just, is this my mind? Is this, of course it's your mind, but is this your mind? What is the process here? What is the process here? And it wasn't until I decided to kiss the cord, kiss the cord, kiss the cord, bless the cord, thank the cord, that it was able to dissolve. And I really saw that as a method of forgiveness, of healing, of letting go. I think it's also helpful to sit in meditation and visualize the person in front of you. And then visualize a ball of light coming up out of them that is their higher self, and having a conversation or forgiving them. But you have to make sure you can stay really in your space of peace and compassion, that you don't, in the same way when you meditate and end up with your grocery list, that you don't end up with your litany of things that you're still not quite over or managed or compassionate about this person. Sometimes it helps to think of other people, maybe people that you have already forgiven, and then move on to this person. I think praying for people, wishing them well, wrapping them in light, also can help. This connects back to the idea that everyone is doing the absolute best that they can. And you want them to grow. You want them to heal. You don't want them to be hurt people who hurt people. You want them too to be healed people that heal people. And if we all take care of our energy hygiene, our relationship hygiene, and forgive and bless and elevate the energy, this is one of the most vital things I think that any of us can do to, as Clarissa Pinkola Estes says, reach out and mend the part of the world that we can reach. Nanda